Today on History's Prototypes, we are looking at the M6 heavy tank. This tank, designed by the United States Army Ordnance Corps, was built right before the US's entrance into World War II and was supposed to be the United States' new heavy tank. However, due to delay issues, the lack of proper development, the tank never really went anywhere. But let's go ahead and look at the M6 heavy tank. Now, the story of the M6 actually starts during the interwar period, in which the United States was pretty much behind in tank development. Due to lack of funding and really a lack of effort, the United States didn't really push into heavy tank development. However, by the 1930s, the US realized it was behind in terms of tank development and decided to go ahead and begin full-scale production on at least developing a series of prototype tanks. Now, the initial decision was that they needed different classes of tanks, light, medium, and heavy tanks. So they started working on a new heavy tank design. And they really couldn't decide what they wanted to go with. The initial thought was to go ahead and go with the popular multi-turreted tank development that started in the 1920s, copying the British Vickers A1E1 Independent and the Soviet T-35. But Europe was actually already in the process of abandoning the multi-turret design, and roughly around the same time, the United States developers reached the same conclusion that the multi-turret design was inferior and a more efficient single-turret design would be necessary for future tank development. So the United States began developing a new tank. It would utilize a 76mm main gun and a 37mm coaxial gun. It would actually have a combination of 50 calibers and 30 caliber machine guns in various situations for a total of 6 machine gun mounts on the vehicle. After the selection of the engine and transmission for the vehicle, it was finally publicly revealed in August of 1940 as the M6 heavy tank. And a series of variants were automatically produced for the vehicle. The M6 was a cast hull, the M6A1 was a welded hull. Additionally, the first 3 prototypes were testing what would be the best transmission for it. One was developed with an electric transmission, and the 2 others were developed with torque converter transmissions, trying to discover what would actually work on whether it be the welded hull or the cast hulls. Now, the initial order for the vehicle was 115 of the T1E1 prototype models, so that the Army could evaluate it, determine what would be the best purpose and best development of the vehicle. Then the vehicle would begin its full-fledged production. So it was decided with this 115 production order, 50 of them would be the M6 cast hull for the United States, and 65 would be the welded hull and be sent to the British. And the idea being is that they would continue testing it, but at least be able to provide their ally with a heavy tank that could support themselves with. Now, a few minor changes were made when they went into production. The cupola was replaced with a double door hatch on the ring mount, while the machine gun in a rotor mount and the left front machine gun were removed, reducing it from 6 machine guns to 4. And now that the vehicle was finally ready to go into full production, the United States Army Ordnance Department basically lost interest in it. All the advantages that this new M6 had over the currently being developed medium tanks, its much thicker armor, its slightly more powerful gun, were offset basically because it was full of design issues. It had a high silhouette, making it an easy target. It had an awkward internal layout and reliability problems. Also, partly because of logistical concerns, it was overweight. So this meant that it was not as fast, it would have an issue in certain field conditions, and would start to sink pretty easily in some of the areas. So the Army Corps decided that the new M4 Sherman basically was the better way to go, and that there was no need for a heavy tank when they could produce a cheap, reliable, much easier to transport tank. And they decided to go ahead and reduce the order of M6s from 115 to 40 to 1, not cut off entire production, they can keep more production going, 2, finish it out so they could actually test it and do some viability studies of the actual hull. So these early tanks that were produced were sent to Fort Knox in 1943, basically to test it, see what was wrong with it, see what could be improved upon it. Early reports show that they were very critical of it. It was an awkward tank. It had inefficient crew stations. The 37mm gun was basically useless, but the tank itself had actually performed decently enough that at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, they decided to go ahead and use it as a test platform. The 76mm gun was found to be lacking, so a new 90mm gun was tested on it instead. And the 90mm gun was actually found to be a very sufficient weapon, and the Army actually rather liked it. But because of the poor turret layout, they decided to just go ahead and keep the gun and get rid of the M6 at this point, and the entire project was canceled. The tanks would only see a short lifespan after this, when several of them were utilized by the United States for propaganda purposes, and they were basically used for war bonds. But by the end of the war, every single one of them was scrapped except for a single T1E1 prototype turret. But this was not the end of the development of heavy tanks for the United States, as this would show them they needed a better design, and it would push for the development of the T-29 and T-30 heavy tanks. But there you have it, a look at the M6 heavy tank, a tank that the United States had built roughly in a time period when they really didn't know as much about tank development. The progression was rather slow, and so they created a tank that they thought would be the next generation of tanks for them, but pretty much failed. It never left the United States. It was very limited testing. It was pretty much spent the remainder of its career as a propaganda tool to sell war bonds. But it did spur on the development of future heavy tanks. But that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.